This movie's shaping up to be one of Disney's biggest box office bombs of all time. And it's not really hard to see why.
But I've been looking for this all my life.
Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny, the second Indiana Jones movie that nobody asked for. Indiana Jones is, of course, one of the most classic, recognizable franchises in the history of Hollywood, essentially. Its first three films are beloved by many, even though I don't really like Temple of Doom, but I think both Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade are virtually perfect films, just like a lot of other people do. And then, in 2008, Lucasfilm decided to release a fourth movie entitled Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And when the movie came out, it actually got quite a bit of praise. But nowadays, people seem to have turned on the movie, and they consider it obviously they consider it a bad movie, but they also consider, one of the main complaints is that it was unnecessary. And I take an issue with that complaint. Just because a movie is unnecessary or nobody wanted it doesn't mean it can't be good. Nobody was asking for a Jungle Book remake, but people really liked that one, and so did I. Nobody asked for a lot of adaptations of anything, but people still like the Harry Potter movies are still really well liked. And I know you're going to say people wanted adaptations of those. There are going to be people that say nobody wanted this, or hell, Solo, even though, again, the argument for that one, people did want a Solo movie until the movie was announced for some reason. I don't know why all of a sudden they were claiming nobody wanted this movie when plenty of people were wanting, but I digress. The movie ended up being pretty good, even if it did get mixed reviews, but again, I don't really care about that. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not that bad. It's not a great movie. I think had they changed the ending and not made it about aliens, I think the movie would have played better. But there were other issues as well. The stupid jungle scene with Shia LaBeouf swinging around like Tarzan was fucking stupid. The presence of Shia LaBeouf at all was really bad, but we'll get to that in a second, believe it or not. But overall, there was some really crappy CGI in the movie, because that was around the time the CGI was starting to get better, but it was still stuck in the 2000s era, which had not so great CGI, let's put it that way. So, overall, I think that one's a fine movie, and I wasn't really looking forward to this. Nobody was, really, because we've all seen Disney Lucasfilm, and it's not necessarily just the fact that I'm opposed to a fifth Indiana Jones movie, but there are a couple of drawbacks right off the bat. One, you can tell Harrison Ford doesn't really care about doing a fifth one, and in this movie, it's obvious he doesn't really want to be here. And two, the main reason is that we've seen what Disney Lucasfilm does to franchises. Disney, on its own, really, what it does to franchises. Especially Star Wars. Now, again, they started hot with Star Wars, with Force Awakens and Rogue One being praised by many, but Last Jedi was very heavily divisive. People started seeing the cracks in Disney storytelling. Solo was released to mixed reception and bombed big time at the box office, and Rise of Skywalker was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And if not that, then it was definitely Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because after Rise of Skywalker, people refused to ingest the crap. Disney has now learned, or at least they should have, they've been told at least, they haven't learned shit, but they have been told time and time again that you cannot just keep making these lazy-ass shows. Like The Mandalorian Season 3, I haven't watched it, but I've seen plenty of reviews that break down the episode so I know what happens, and it's some of the laziest storytelling I've ever seen. And again, Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, The Acolyte looks like garbage, the Ahsoka show doesn't look very good. It's all lazy Disney garbage. That's the best way to put it. It's garbage. So nobody was really expecting this one to be good, but surprisingly enough, it started getting actually pretty decent reviews. The critic reviews were relatively mixed, but more on the positive side, and audiences are actually seeming to like this movie. But what the hell was that? I don't know if you guys, I don't even know if the audio picked that up, but whatever. because it was something outside, but I digress. So, how is the movie actually? Was I wrong in thinking that this was going to be just more Lucasfilm bullshit? No, I was right. This is pretty bad. To be fair, it's not quite as cringeworthingly, that's not how you say that, it's cringeworthingly awful as I thought it was going to be, but it's still pretty bad. And again, people say, when they bring up the unnecessary or nobody wanted this, usually I don't really buy that complaint, like I already explained. But when your main actor clearly doesn't want to be here, it starts to become a problem. Now, Harrison Ford, I guarantee he showed up for the paycheck. He got paid like $20 million to be in this movie, I think I saw. So this was a paycheck performance. You can tell he looks and sounds pissed off the entire movie. And I'm guessing it was kind of written that way because at this point in time, Indy's retired. Was it 1969? Is that when this takes place? The opening takes place in 1944, around the time of the end of the war. Around the time where Germany surrendered, at least. Because I think it takes place like right after Germany surrendered to America. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's the case. And it's Indy and Toby Jones' character. I honestly don't really remember many people's names in this movie because they weren't memorable. Let's put it that way. But they're stealing the Dial of Destiny, which is essentially a time machine. It's a tiny time machine. And, well, they get half of it at least, and that ends up just sitting in his collections for the next 25 years. And the other half is hidden away, which takes up the majority of this 2.5-hour movie. Yeah, this movie's too fucking long. 2.5 there's no excuse for this to be 2.5 hours. There's so much you could cut from this movie, and with some basic rewrites you could drop this movie down to just over 2 hours, around the time of Last Crusade. And I watched Last Crusade just a few days ago, so the difference between these movies is telling. And one thing I will give credit from what I've heard is that they cut out a lot of jokes about Indy's age that would have been in the original version when Steven Spielberg was still set to direct. So I can give him credit for that, but it's still an issue hanging around, not just in the jokes, but within the movie itself. The stunt work in this movie is pretty good, and the doubles used like really realistic masks of Harrison Ford. And they're pretty convincing, but they result in Indy's face being very wooden and emotionless during the fight scenes. And something else that was really heavily talked about in the trailer was the de-aged Indiana Jones in the opening scene. And the reason the trailer only showed scenes where his head isn't really moving is because when his head does move, the effect starts to show. Like I said, it's a pretty good effect, but there becomes a point where you start to see the effect. Again, especially when his head moves around, you start to see the visual effects in there. And the worst thing in this movie is, of course, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, and also, one thing, I'm already getting sick of these movies trying to make fun of capitalism. It sure as hell wasn't funny in Across the Spider-Verse, especially when that joke didn't even make sense in the context of the film. And this one makes it even worse, because Disney clearly does not fucking understand what capitalism is. And because Disney's a big communist organization. Or they support communism, just like a lot of other leftist idiots on the internet. And off the internet as well. But she is fucking annoying. Pretty much the entire movie, she's supposed to be Indy's goddaughter, and she feels abandoned after her father died, I guess, because I guess Indy wasn't there to take care of her, I guess. It's confusing as shit, and they're just bitching at each other the entire movie. Now, I kind of understand it. Like, realistically, them bitching at each other the entire time would make sense, but it sure as shit isn't entertaining to watch. Oh my god, it's annoying. And so is her character. I can't fucking stand her being essentially the main hero. And if you all saw, like, all the leaks about the ending, where Indy wants to stay in the past and her knocking him out, even if you haven't seen the movie, you've probably heard about that ending, and it's just as bad as you think. And Something else I wanted to talk about that was a really what the fuck kind of move with this movie is revolving around Indy's son, Mutt. Yes, that's his real name, if you don't remember Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Or whether or not it's his actual real name, I don't remember, but not the point. The point is, he's not around. And there's so many, and him and his wife are divorced. And you know why they're divorced? And why his son's not around? Oh man, I heard about this before the movie, but I swore it had to be fake. But nope. His son was killed off in between movies during the Vietnam War. Oh yeah, they went that route. There's so many other ways you could have written that, and that's the one you went with. Again, it's not necessarily, like, in its nature, it's not a bad thing to do, but it's just a huge, what the fuck is wrong with you kind of moment. There's nothing else you could have done with this character. Like, I get not bringing back Shia LaBeouf, because no one wants to see Shia LaBeouf. Hell, they didn't in 2008. But that's what you went with? And again, him and his wife are divorced because they couldn't really get over that fact, and they get together at the end again, because, as if we haven't gone that route already, they get together and then break off after Raiders, or before Raiders, and then after Raiders, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Hell, maybe they'll get divorced again before Indy dies. Who the fuck knows? It wouldn't shock me at this point if, like, a post-Dial of Destiny comic book came out, or a TV show came out where they're split off again. It wouldn't shock me, because they're trying to build up Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character as essentially the new hero. Like, I think they're working on a movie behind the scenes trying to make about her basically taking on the mantle of Indiana Jones. That better not fucking happen. So, oh my god, like, again, this wasn't as, I thought every line, every story detail, oh yeah, Mads Mikkelsen, I forgot about, this movie's biggest crime, I forgot about Mads Mikkelsen. He's always, even in Secret to Dumbledore, he was pretty good, which was a terrible movie, but he at least managed to bring a good performance. I forgot about Mikkelsen. He is very similar to Grand Admiral Thrawn, which makes sense, because I think Thrawn was actually played by his brother or something. But he's basically that. He doesn't really do much, and he just sits around acting superior to everybody and just being kind of a pretentious douchebag. That's his role throughout the entire movie. And I said the action sequences aren't terrible, but they're nowhere near as good as the original movies, or even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, this was bad. Don't watch this. I'm glad this movie's getting its ass whipped by Sound of Freedom. Definitely go watch that. Don't watch this. This is not worth your money or your time. I'm gonna give Indiana Jones on the Dial of Destiny a D. So thank you all so much for watching, and fuck you, Disney.